Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to season three of the Eddie Network podcast. This is our first episode of the season, and I'm looking forward to some new things that we're going to do this year. And I hope you will stay with me and maybe even recommend some people that I should be talking to. And it's going to be a good year. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to starting this year with my friend Ned Erickson. I've gotten to know him here in Winston-Salem. We hang out and drink coffee together, among other things. And he's a fine man. And one of these people, if you can cover your ears, Ned. One of these people that every community needs to have a set of, because they are the people who can move into all kinds of circumstances and bring leadership to it. So I have a great deal of respect for you, Ned, and thank you for being here. So kind of give us an idea of what you do and what's up with you.
Yeah, that's always a one of those questions, you get at a dinner party, so what do you do? And I always have a difficult time answering it because uh, I was raised to be well-rounded. That was a big value in our family, and I really took that to heart. It really served me well all the way through high school and college, and then when I entered the workforce, trying to figure out that one thing to do has always been a challenge for me. And currently, I get to serve at Piedmont Federal Bank, which is a community bank here in Winston-Salem. I'm the director of community impact. So when it comes to the circle of impact, I'm really intrigued by Ed, your thoughts on what impact really looks like. I don't know how many people you've had on your podcasts that actually have impact in their title, but I get to serve
Not
here in
many.
that capacity. I also have started several nonprofits and do nonprofit consulting. I write books and love being creative and playing music. And Ed and I met with one of the ventures that I've been most recently a part of, which is trying to revitalize a part of our city that's really the most historical piece, which is called Old Salem, and building a coffee shop, bar, and bakery down there as a place of community. And it has been a joy to meet people like you, Dr. Ed, and and many more like you that have embraced that space and made it your own. So I
Yeah,
should say I'm
great.
also married to an incredible woman and have two great kids and tried to juggle all that as well.
You juggle a lot. Yeah, that venture you've done at Lot 63 down in Old Salem is really um, taken off well. And for those of you who don't actually know what we're talking about, Lot 63 is a kind of a typical coffee house or coffee shop, but it has been intentionally developed to be a third place. And if you understand what third places are, those are places that are not workplaces, they're not homes, they're social gathering places where the community can meet one another and have conversations and work. And they're essential to a healthy community. And one of the things that happened during COVID was a lot of those places went out of business. And so a lot of the things that are having to happen in communities all over the country are to recreate these third places. And Ned is part of the team that's doing this. And I think it's exceeded your expectations. It's only been a year, right?
Yeah, we're about to hit our anniversary in about a month. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really great. So let me ask you this question because because you're like me, you have a kind of a big picture, you have a big perspective of what's going on. And talk to me about what you see as sort of the needs for leadership in a community today. Is it different than it was, say, 20 years ago?
Uh, I don't know if I can answer that. In the terms of time, I do
Okay.
feel like we have a particular need today for a particular kind of leader that I long for, and I'm striving to be in our community. And I guess I could share a little bit about what I mean by that,
Yeah,
if that would be helpful, Ed.
good.
Well, some of your listeners might know this parable. I can start with it. So there was a traveler who was walking down the road years ago in the countryside of France and saw these three stonemasons who were working on some kind of construction project. And the the traveler didn't know what they were building, and so he went to the first person and said, "Hey, I see you're a stonemason. What are you building?" And he said, "Well, I have no idea. All I do is I take this brick and I put it on top of the next one, and I get paid for it. And with that money, I provide for my family, and that's what I'm doing." And he nodded and goes, "Well, that's a worthy thing to provide for your family, but that doesn't really help me understand what you're building." And so he goes to the next person and he asks them, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, we're building this wall, um, and it's um, it's connected to something, and but I don't really know what. But it is a stable income because this project's going to last for a long time." And the traveler again um, nods, but it doesn't really answer his question. So he goes to the third stonemason and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the third stonemason turns to him and says, "Oh, I'm building a cathedral, and this cathedral is going to take 100 years to build, and I'm never going to see the end of it. And maybe my son won't even see the end of it, but maybe my grandson will get this, put the cornerstone or the capstone on this project." And the traveler nodded and realized, okay, this is what they're building, and that that's the kind of leadership that I think we need in this day and age. Is that third type of stonemason, leaders who are cathedral builders. All three of those stonemasons were doing the same thing. They were building a wall. They were laying bricks, but the third mason had the vision to see that he was being part of something much greater than himself. And this came crystal clear to me. I was doing some work, starting a nonprofit in our community that was focusing on teacher education. And I traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, to do some research. There's a wonderful organization called the Memphis Teacher Residency that if you're interested in teacher education and teacher deployment, check out MTR. And as I was out there meeting with community leaders and the leadership of MTR, and they had some other really amazing people thinking about how to reshape Memphis and tackle some of the challenges that are so ingrained into their history. And I remember this one gentleman, he told me, you know, it took 200 years for us to make this mess. It's going to take 200 years for us to get out of it. And I kept hearing that over and over and over again from from Memphis leaders that they were trying to fix 100-year problems, that they were committed to generational solutions. And none of those leaders were ever going to see the result of their work, but they were passionately committed to it. And I think that is what I long for. And to me, that is the critical need that we all have wherever we live, that we have a leadership shortage of vision when it comes to commitment to generational challenges. All of the things that really need to be addressed in our communities. The problems didn't happen overnight. They resulted over generations and generations of decisions. And it's going to take generations and generations to solve these things. And because of our election cycle, just because of our short attention spans, because of the that need for immediate results, I think the temptation is to put aside those generational commitments and sign up for something that just is here and now. I think of like the onset of like GoFundMe campaigns. We're really good at GoFundMe campaigns because they're so immediate, and there is a just that immediate like results, but they don't really solve these big challenges. You can't GoFundMe your way out of systemic racism, or you can't GoFundMe out of the alleviation of poverty. It's going to take a generational commitment of people who will not see the results, but are willing to be faithful bricklayers. And so, to me, I think that probably was the need 20 years ago. That probably was the need 40 years ago. Um, I think that's always been the need. And today's the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and he was that kind of leader. He was a man who was committed to a cause that would not occur in his lifetime. And I feel like those types of leaders are few and far between when I look at the landscape of our politics, our CEOs, or I think things like this. There's just so many pressures for quarterly results. If you don't get things done in the next month, you'll never get them done. And I think that really is unfortunate that we live in a climate like that because it's not what we need.
I agree with you. It's well said. It's really, really well said and really clear in what you're telling us. When I when I started my when I guess it was when I first started as a consultant 30 years ago, but it took a few years, and I came to the conclusion that leadership was not a title or a role. Leadership was how we function in our lives, and that the important thing is for people to take personal initiative to create impact, and impact meaning some kind of change that is beneficial. And so my purpose became encouraging and equipping people to take personal initiative to create impact in their local communities, because I saw that that is the place where the most direct effect of impact can be felt. And so I operated upon that principle for 15 years. And when I began to write my book, Circle of Impact, one of one of my buddies said, "So what's your goal?" And this was a business startup cohort, and we were talking about, you know, uh, how you grow businesses and things like that. He said, "What's your goal?" I said, "I've never thought about a goal, but I guess my goal is to move 1% of the world's population to take personal initiative to create impact in their local communities." And his response was, "Well, how are you going to do that?" And my thought was, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to lay the seeds of that vision out there. And because it's impossible for me to be in control of a vision that is that grand. But that's what we're talking about. You do what you can to fulfill a vision which is much larger than yourself. And so the odd thing about that, you think about what's 1% of 8 billion people, and I don't know what that is. I don't even want to try to guess. It's eight with some zeros. That's all I know. Um, after I said that to him, he came back to me. He says, "Well, why shouldn't you just 10x that goal? Why shouldn't it be 10% of the world's population?" And I said, "It can be, but that's just maybe becomes too much. 1% is enough to bite off." So so what happened was, and this was um, unexpected, and I think you'll appreciate this. So I came to a point about a year after writing the book, publishing the book, that I knew that I was moving into a different phase of all of this, but I didn't know what that meant. So, keep in mind, I had this goal of moving 1% of the world's population, and I was led into, first of all, a group of Africans who brought me to Africa to begin to talk about leadership in Africa. And the first group I went to work with was a rural economic development group that was working in, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 18 countries. So I was influencing those leaders and those who were going to those countries to build leadership in the rural economic development field. And I began to realize how so much of what we're doing in this is relationship building, not simply acting, but the relationships that lead us into expanding our reach with these great visions is really the key. So what emerged from that was I created this little thing called the Global Impact Network, and it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist online anywhere. It exists in my relationship to individuals, where I'm helping those individuals develop their networks. And it's not an easy thing, but you see, that's another little piece of how that thing gets developed. And then I started writing on Substack, and then I started the podcast. But when I started writing on Substack, something took place where a third of the people who are my subscribers are from India. And I think it came because I commented on one Indian Substack post 3 years ago. I made a comment there, and that guy recommended me. And all these people, every day, almost every day, I get someone coming from India. So there's this, so there's this thing that I think what you're saying, and what I'm agreeing with you, is that when we take these visions and we begin to work on them, we begin to work on our own stone, shaping the stone and putting it in place and making sure it's set. But we're doing it with other people, that those relationships, those collaborative relationships, are really what ultimately creates the change that is needed to be made.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's spot on. It reminds me of an analogy that I often think of. It's sort of a proposition. If you were given the opportunity to be given 100 or $1 million today, or a penny today, but that penny would double every day for the next 30 days, which would you pick? And so you can tell it's probably a trick question. So, it's the penny.
The penny.
And it's true. The penny is, the first day you get a penny, the second day you have 2 pennies, so it's 3 pennies. And then the next day it's 3 more pennies and 6 pennies. If you keep going, it ends up being 10 million over 30 days. And to me, that proposition has been something I've banked on, because it is relational. And I'll give you a real example. I've witnessed that in my life. I've started a nonprofit where I focus on just a few people, and train them to be leaders, and then it just multiplies. But in Africa, there an organization I used to work for and still am involved with is Young Life International. And Young Life started in the United States, and about 35 years ago, it was started in Africa by a guy named Chuck, and he met a few people in Ethiopia, and he realized, wow, this continent's really big. I'm going to have a different strategy. And so he just decided to focus on discipling a few people, and then they would disciple people. And they called it the mango tree strategy. So you can have a tomato tree that has a lot of fruit all of a sudden, but then it dies after the season and you have to plant it again. But a mango tree, its fruit multiplies and then multiplies and then multiplies. And so over the last 30 years, that has been their strategy. So every leader in Africa is given a leadership tree, and their job is to disciple three people. And then those three people, their job is to disciple three people. And they actually model this out. And it's been an incredible thing. In fact, Young Life is bigger in Africa now than if you add up all the Young Life chapters in all the other countries, including the United States. That's all happened in the last 30 years because of that leadership principle of relationship, person to person, multiplying that mango tree principle. So you're totally right, and it's counterintuitive. I think we we think that, man, if we can just um, get a video that goes viral and we have all these views, that's impact, but that's not real impact. That's just that's like a tomato tree. It's here one day and it's gone the next. But real impact is relational, which is what you're talking about.
So what are the obstacles that we face in a community that keep us from being able to forge that kind of visionary set of relationships?
Well, um, in some ways, the beauty of relationship is there are no real obstacles. There's nothing between keeping you and I from becoming friends. All it took was just a tiny bit of initiative, to use your word. And I don't know who did it first. I don't know if it was me. I don't know if it was you.
I think it was Trent.
But I think there.
I think it was
Oh, it's
Trent.
Trent.
Yeah, I think that's where it came from.
Um, well, there you go. That's even better. That it's those connectors connecting the dots for us that really matter. So the biggest obstacle is really our willingness. Are we willing to take to create vulnerability based trust with each other, which is a value that we have here at Piedmont Federal Bank. I really appreciate vulnerability based trust, that we're willing to expose ourselves um, enough to each other that we allow another person in for us to be known, which is really our biggest desire. Our our biggest desire in life is to be known and to be loved, to be accepted for who we are. Our biggest fear is to be exposed, to be known, and to be rejected. And so that is a big fear. And so I would say, if when you come to obstacles, that would be the biggest obstacle, is really that fear that we have of rejection. Um, and that, I mean, you can take that and institutionalize it, but really it comes down to fear. And again, are we willing to be the kind of people who can be freed of that fear, to be willing to live vulnerable lives with one another, that we can build trust, which trust is the most valuable commodity in the world. And I think you say this in your book. It's also the thing you can lose really quickly if you aren't careful. But I think that overcoming fear would be an obstacle. And maybe when trust is lost, which will happen because we live in a fallen world, a willingness to rebuild trust with one another and to create an acceptance of that we don't have to be perfect, that we will fail each other, but we are still committed to togetherness and relationship. I think those probably would be essential, fundamental qualities. But relationships in one realm are free. They're you don't have to spend a dime to build a friendship, but they're also the most costly. I think that's one of the because they require time, they require vulnerability, um, and they do require effort.
And what I observe is that they're difficult to establish across um, divisional lines, you know, where there is something which automatically sets the relationship into a context of conflict. So
Mm,
there's an inherent conflict between, we'll just kind of put it this way. There's an inherent conflict between the left and the right in America. There's an inherent conflict between the poor and the rich in America. There's an inherent conflict between African Americans and white people in America. There's all these inherent conflicts in the society that we have. And like your Memphis analogy, it's taken us 200 years, 250 years to get here. And so we got another 250 years to get out of it. So we're not going to get out of it in our lifetime. But what I find is that you can forge relationships which are the physical representation of the vision so that other people can see, oh, this is actually possible. And I think that's
yeah,
a
I
large
totally
part of
agree.
what we need. Um, and and so what that calls for is us to give up our rights to be right and to be in charge and to be powerful and to be respected and to be acknowledged as someone of importance. And I think we have to sacrifice all those things in order to be a real person with other people. And
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. One way you can look at all of world history is through the lens of a power dynamic.
yeah,
There's uh, um, the the Israelites were um, put into slavery by the Egyptians because the Egyptians had the power, and they made the Israelites slaves, and then the Israelites became free, um, and they took over the Promised Land, and they immediately enslaved people that they took over. And then the Assyrians came and overpowered them, and on and it goes. The Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, um, the colonialists. It's you whenever you have power, you use it to your interest, and you use it to exploit other people. And except there's one moment in history where that didn't happen. Um, 2,000 years ago, the most powerful human that ever lived, who had the ability, he had he was given permission by powers to take over the world if he wanted, and he did not do it. Instead, he used that power. Um, in fact, he sacrificed his life for other people, for the salvation of the world. And to me, if there's one thing that proves the divinity of Jesus Christ, it's that he, unlike any other powerful person that ever lived, was willing to lay down his life for the sake of others. And I think that's what it really means to follow him. For a man like you, like a man like me, who has some inherent power because of the fact that we're white, because of the fact that we're male, because we live in the United States. We have we have power. And the question is, are we willing to use that power, um, not for ourselves, and not to put down other people, or serve our own interests, but are we willing to use that influence or whatever you want to use, say, if power is too uncomfortable of a word, are you willing to use that power for the sake of other people? So I do think that is a a call for us who want to be a follower of Jesus. We have to consider what it really looks like when we do have influence and power to be like him and to be unlike um, the culture, which I do think is a huge challenge. You know, our culture is sort of built, like you said, um, to divide us, to create these lines of division. You know, our cities are built in ways that everything you need is within a couple miles of us. That walkability score is really important in cities. But you know what all that does? It keeps us from one another, and prevents us from really building those relationships across cultures and across dividing lines. And you know, Brian Stevenson, who's definitely one of my heroes, he talks about one of the keys to undoing some of the generations of injustice in our cities and our world is through proximity, is the word he uses, which we need to be proximate people and deliberately choose to plant ourselves, put ourselves in other circles and other places, where we're not the majority. You know, we specifically plant ourselves in places where we're minority members. We make decisions that take us outside of our little bubbles or wherever, um, our echo chambers, and start listening to other people. And that is a choice. The world's not going to force us to do that. We have to be the kind of people that take that initiative to be proximate people. Um, and that takes a lot of it. That takes choice and willpower.
And that's why I moved into the neighborhood I did when I moved here back to Winston-Salem. Um, because when I lived here up through high school, I finished high school in 1971. The racial divide here was extreme.
Mhm.
And I went to all white schools. I had some African American teachers, and I had a couple of African American coaches. And my senior year, my head coach of the football team at Mount Tabor, where I went to high school, was a black man, and he had played professional football in Canada, and he was the an assistant coach at Winston-Salem State, and he came to our school, and I watched how the subtle racism that exists in society. I'm not blaming any one person in particular. It's just what has grown up over a couple of centuries, um, was set to be an obstacle to him being a good coach. And he never responded to the stuff that was said about him. He held his dignity, and particularly for us who were seniors. So this was our last time for most of us. This is the last time we'd be playing football. You know, he became this person that we looked up to, and um, we knew he was a black man, but he was even more so a man who exhibited dignity in the face of conflict. And we talk about that when we gather together because it changed us as young men, you know, and it made us see the world differently. So when I moved back here, I wondered what things would be like, and things are different. And what I have found is that racial divide still exists in Winston-Salem, but it is it is less so than it used to be. And we whites and blacks are more likely to talk to one another. And I'm living in a neighborhood which is probably three-quarters African American. And I love these people. And I think they respect me. And, and that to me, that is the kind of the ground that out of which some mango trees can grow for my
Amen.
our city. Because I think
Yeah.
we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, I do. I agree. But spend some time with some elementary school students, and they can be our leaders when it comes to seeing people as people and not seeing people based on the color of their skin. They're much better than we are, and that's what gives me hope. I think that's the generational um, thing that we're talking about. Uh, that they really are our hope, and we need to encourage what they're teaching us and learn from them.
You were involved in a mentoring program, right? Or a program that brings young adults here for a year or two to, is that what it's called? Is it mentoring or what is it called?
Yeah, it's called the Winston-Salem Fellows program. There's about 30 of these programs around the country as part of the Fellows Initiative. And, we're celebrating, I think we're heading into our 10th year of the Fellows program here in Winston-Salem. And it has been, um, it has been one of the greatest things that I've ever been a part of. And um, just been uh, just incredibly moved by the way intentional spiritual formation can radically impact people's lives. And so it's a it's a 12 it's a 1 year program. It's actually only 9 months. We recruit people from all over the country to move to our city. We get them a job in the field of their interest, if they have one. Some people like me coming out of college just are sort of wide open, and we help them get a job where they're going to get real life experience. They work throughout the week, and then while they're working, they live together in a big community house. They each get a mentor that walks alongside them throughout the year. They get a family that adopts them for the year, that gives them a home cooked meal once a week, and they get a little window of what it looks like to live in a home. And then we have some theological um, and social, mental, emotional education. You could call it spiritual formation, where we're educating them on what it looks like to be live in this thing called the kingdom, and to be those kind of cathedral builders that we're talking about. Over the course of the program, they develop a personal mission statement where they think about what it really means to be the person that they were created to be, and how that is worked out in the course of their life. And it's been a remarkable thing. It's been a great thing for our city. Winston-Salem is not historically been the kind of city that recruits talent really well. But this program really has a stickiness to it. So even though you might be moving from, across the country, there's the connection that you make to this city is deeper than you've ever had to any other place. And so if you can find um, meaningful work and find a community that really cares about you and that you care about, you're going to stick around. That's really the secret sauce to building a city, building community. It's those two things: meaningful work and community. And if you can develop that, you can really uh, make a dramatic change in the kind of people that you're able to bring to a city, and that will stay there for the long haul.
Fantastic. And I see that as preparing these young adults to be uh, really adept leaders 20 years out. When they reach their 40s and they've had some seasoning and they've had some successes and they've had some failures and And they're at that point that many in their 40s reach, which is, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Because in many cases, the rest of their life is going to be another 40 to 50 years. And the first 40 will have been training preparation for the last 40, 45, 50. It didn't used to be that way, but it's that way now. And I see that. So it's in some ways you're giving them that experience of decision about who am I and what do I want to do post
Yeah.
college and while they're in the working world.
Yeah. Well, I do think that clarity of call is really important. Because if I think of it as a compass, if you can kind of understand your true north in terms of vocation, and why it is that God planted you here on this earth, which I do believe God wants you to know that. And so we've built a process to kind of figure that out. I don't think He wants to keep that a secret from you. But if you can learn that compass point, that's really going to help you, especially in today's environment, where the jobs of the future don't even exist yet. So not only will you not the job that you have today not be the job you're going to have 10 years from now, the job you have 10 years from now hasn't been invented yet. That's how fast the world's changing. And so to be able to not think of the what I'm going to do as the most important thing, but who am I called to be is really the most important thing. And learning that adaptability to be able to adjust. I've had the blessing and the misfortune of having lots of different jobs over the course of my career, but I've really had one thing I've been trying to accomplish, which is to help people learn and discover the people they were created to be. So that's my mission. I want to help people discover who they are, and to believe that enough to actually live it out. So that's my mission. I do it here as a banker. I did it. I do it when I'm visiting people with people at Lot 63. Um, so that mission stays the same, even though the application of it might change. And that's what we teach in the fellows program. And I think that's a critical consideration as we're thinking about building leaders for the future.
Yeah, and I would only add to that every context that we encounter is not just an idea, but it's actually something real. Where if we act to make a difference in that context, we will make a difference in that context. So the context being, well, the city is just a social construct. So I don't have to really do anything in the city. No, the city is a place that people live and you encounter people. And if you're walking down the street, you can stop and talk to someone and you can make a difference that matters to them by merely stopping and talking to them. You can be that kind of person and you can have that kind of impact. And they may have a question. You say, well, I know someone who maybe you should talk to, and you give them, you say, well, give me your name and phone number, and I'll have them get in touch with you. It's that sort of always being attentive to what's happening in front of us, and
Mhm.
knowing that whatever I have to offer, I can offer it in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I call that the magic. Yeah, that's the magic that happens.
Yeah.
Um, when I look back on the decisions that I've made in my life or the impact that I've had in others, almost all of it happened just spur of the moment, just as I was going on. In fact, I think that's biblical. When you look at the Gospels, most of what Jesus does, it says while he was going on the way, this is what happened. And so I think it's that attentiveness that you're talking about, awareness that any moment, any encounter could have eternal consequences. And what a cool life that is. That's magical that we could participate in something of that magnitude. I mean, that's what gets me up in the morning, and probably freaks people out sometimes because I'm probably too eager to have those experiences sometimes. But I do believe that we live lives of great consequence. Um, I also believe that we're inconsequential and that God could use anybody. He doesn't. I'm unessential to him, uh, and there's nothing special about me. Um, I'm not necessary, but uh, that also qualifies me to do great things. Um, as long as I'm willing, as long as I raise my hand and show up and take those steps, magic can happen. And I want to be part of that. You know, why not be part of that? Um, it
So,
doesn't make me special, um, but I've been part of special moments.
so let me ask you this. This is the last question. Do you think it is possible, you're, do you think it's
I'm
possible
here.
for the people that you're connected to and the people that I'm connected to and and our connection together to be able to say to people who don't live here, why don't you move here and join us in this venture of trying to make a difference in the city? Is that an invitation that we should be offering to people? If you want to be a person of impact and you don't have a place to do that, we invite you to come here and join us.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, if you give me a second to promote our city, I'll definitely do it.
Do
You
that.
know, I describe us as a Goldilocks city. You know, we're not too big, we're not too small, we're just right. And I think that the beautiful thing about Winston-Salem, and I think this is not true just to Winston-Salem, but it is important about our city is that there's still what I would call white space here. There's there's margin here for creative people to make impacts. And you know, I've been to some cities where it feels like every good idea has already been tried. There's just not a lot of space for people. But here, there's still white space. There's still opportunity to try things. There's no reason in the world that a guy like me would have an opportunity to start a coffee shop bar in our heart center historical part of our city. Um, to me, Winston-Salem's special to have opportunities like that for people who just say, "I'll do it," you know. And so I love that about our city. If you're just if you are in a position where you want to try something, this is a great place to do it. There's an ecosystem of willing people who are committed to helping folks try out their ideas. And so, come on, man, bring it on. But I do think if you're living in a city, you can't move that. Um, work on creating white space. I think that's probably something I would consider. Don't try to solve all the problems, but maybe build out the margins and see what happens.
I totally agree. I like that very much. Well, Ned, thank you for being here. This is a great start to the new season. Um, it excites me. You know, I've spent my first year back in Winston, not sure why I'm here. And I'm not really clear about that yet, but that what that really does is makes me more patient to wait for that thing that I'm supposed to be doing to come to me rather than constantly striving to create something. So I'm excited about the future. I have hope for the future. I know you do too. And we get to share that venture together. And I thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we can't lose. We're playing for the winning team. You know, I think that's what gives me the motivation. Um, you know, it doesn't. I, people might look at the decisions I make or the things I get into as risky, but you're really not risking anything when you already know you won. And so, um, again, I think that's sort of the beauty of getting to follow this this guy who walked on Earth 2,000 years ago, who is alive today. Um, we've the victory's won. You know, why not um, live as if that's the truth? Because it is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, folks, I hope this has revealed something to you about your own life, your own place that you live, that maybe there are things that you can be doing there to contribute to make a difference. I hope you can, if you do not have that experience in your life, I hope that you will be motivated to go find that, search it out. Um, and if you need some help, give me a call, reach out to me, and I'll be glad to help you. Because what you need where you are is what we find here, which is that white space of opportunity to serve and make a difference that matters. And that's a
Mm.
major part of what this is all about. So thank you for watching. Hit the like button, sign up, leave a comment if you will, and we will see you here next time on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.